And now, coming to you from the classiest radio station on the air, this is
Gerald, well, thanks first of all, for being my guest today. This is going to be a new thing, and I've had tremendous admiration for you for a number of years, and you're one heck of a human being. You have the courage to speak the truth, to swim upstream. What drives you? What gives you this passion, Gerald?
Thank you. I guess the way I was brought up, and first of all, I feel so sad because my business is to be a visionary, and I've been at this for 40 years, and I see the vision, and it's very bleak. And current events form future trends, and all you have to do is look at the current events that are going on, and you can see where we're heading. So why I am who I am, I'm blessed to come from the family I came from. And it wasn't an Ozzie and Harriet life, just to make that clear. But, my father, may he rest in peace, when I'd be shooting my mouth off as a little kid, he'd look at me and in Italian, he'd say to me, Pappagallo, parrot, stop repeating what everybody else is saying and think for yourself. And I heard that enough where I realized if I shut my mouth off, I better have facts behind it and stop repeating the lines. And my mother, may her soul rest in peace, whenever a situation would break out where it was, apparent to say something like this, she would say to me, I hate cowards. And I didn't know what the word meant. When I found out what it meant, I wouldn't do that to disrespect my mother, although I've done a number of other things that wouldn't have made her happy. And I want to make that really clear. I'm not the same guy. Like I say, oh, when this guy went to high school, he did this to a girl. Oh, that would happen. Look, I mean, I'm not talking about the sexual parts, but the other crap that I've pulled in my life. I've always been very respectful to women. But you grow up and I voted for Richard Nixon. I was the chief government affairs specialist for the chemical industry, killing environmental legislation in the 1970s at the height of the environmental movement.
That was part of the GE time when they were polluting the Hudson. Is that when that was happening, going on?
Oh yeah, but I'm killing environmental. I was working for a major trade association. I was a government affairs specialist. Then I ended up being the number 2 guy running the association. At a graduate school, I was running political campaigns in Westchester County, working on the mayoral campaigns, district attorneys, and I was the assistant to the secretary of the New York State Senate at 25 years old. It was all Republican. So, I'm not the guy I was, but I learned from all of that. By being on the other side, if you have an open mind, all I was interested in was making money. I didn't care. So anyway, you asked me how I got here. And I started to grow up in my 30s. And what happened was, as I mentioned, I used to live in Chicago, but traveling back and forth to DC all the time as a government affairs specialist. And Jimmy Carter came back from visiting the Shah, and the revolutions were breaking out.
I have peace in hand, yeah.
Yeah. And he said that the Shah was the island of stability in the Middle East. And at that moment, Barry, I became a political atheist. Because I realized what was going on. Of course, people didn't know about how the United States overthrew the democratically elected government of Mossadegh in 1953 with Kermit Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt's great grandson, and the CIA and the MI6. And anyway, and that really was the breaking point. Because then I said to myself, and this is how I got into trend forecasting. And when Carter said that, by the way, in the Bronx, we used to have a saying, bullshit has its own sound. And that's all that came out of Carter's mouth. So I realized as all the Americans are beginning to hate the Iranians, I'm saying, what will the implications be? Now, remember, this is in the late 70s. I started playing gold and oil futures. I didn't know what I was doing. I parlayed a 5,000. I realized gold is going to go up and oil is going to go up because what's going on over there. And people weren't playing the futures markets back then. It was a very new game. I parlayed a $5,000 bet into almost $750,000. And this is in the 70s when that was a lot of money.
That's a lot of money back then.
Yeah. But to make that, that's when I quit my job and I started Trends Research a couple of years later. And by the way, I lost most of that money gambling, just to
The
make
house
that.
always gets the rake.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. I'm a young guy, just going crazy, So that's how I got to, and then again, from being on the other side, I learned what was going on. I wouldn't know what I was, no, I was with Ronald Reagan for an hour and a half. He was a keynote speaker at our trade association 2 days before he's announcing that he's going to be running against Jerry Ford. And I'm in charge of this thing. I have to pick him up at the Chicago Hilton. We had our trade show at McCormick Place. And those days you took a taxi. This is 1976. I'm 30 years old, So I've been with presidents, prime ministers, and princes.
But it goes back to your parents, really, the passion to tell the truth.
Oh yeah, and my family. I'm a kid, little guy, I'm like what, 5'7", and growing up in the Bronx. And we lived in a nice part of the Bronx. It wasn't like the bad areas, but it was the Bronx. And it was in the 40s and the 50s, And you learn how to fight right away. You didn't go home crying. And so I learned how to fight. And then of course I also had my own school. I used to teach close combat for many years. And I was, practiced martial arts since the 80s. And so I learned how to be a fighter. And that was what my family was. And that was that heritage. You fought. They would have my parents arrested now. We lived in the Bronx, right? And they used to tie me to the crib with nylon stockings because I'm going out the window. I'm climbing out the crib, I ran away from kindergarten. I crossed the Boston Post Road in the Bronx, which is the major road between New York and Albany, to escape kindergarten the second day I was there. Now they'd have me all shot up with drugs. Again, you learn. I was lucky. I grew up, a Napolitano. The people in Naples were different than the rest of Italy. Any Italian will tell you.
Oh yeah, I've lived in Italy. I know.
What?
I've lived in Italy. I know.
So you know.
Oh,
So
I know.
Napolitano, born in the Bronx, born to be free. And I'm also born in 46. The war ends. I'm the first of the baby boomers. And I had sisters and brothers, some rest in peace, were born in the 30s. So I got to see that. And then I had what they call change of life kids, my parents said. And so I had younger sisters, 10 years younger than me. I got to see that. So I got to see grandparents born in there, in the 80s. So I got to see that feeling of like that. So I got to see a lot. And the experiences that I had growing up really formed who I am.
Now, that's awesome because I had great parents too. I mean, and my father was a Marine, and it's like you don't steal, you always tell the truth. And it was, thank you God. I mean, it was, and I'm very, very grateful, and they're very disciplined. And my father, he was Marine. He was in Guadalcanal. It was a tough, tough time. But he was a wonderful, wonderful man. But one of the things, we're in a mess today, as you know. We get the COVID thing, and but I think the bigger issue is really the economic one, Gerald. I don't know what you think, but I think a lot of this it's just the selfishness. I mean, why do you think we're here today? I mean, I just think like selfishness has almost been institutionalized in America. I mean, the Gordon Gekko greed is good. When you look at what's going on in Wall Street now, and all these guys down the street just making billions upon billions, what do you think? This is my take. What do you think? Is it such crazy times? Is it selfishness? I mean, I didn't notice this kind of selfishness when I was growing up, but I
Well,
do
you don't
now.
know it when you're a kid, and it wasn't as bad as this because we used to have a thing called capitalism.
Yeah,
And again, you're talking about the past. I mean, on my father's side, you know, they, they they owned fish stores for the family. They had their own fish stores. You know, and on my mother's side, they were butchers. And well, I mean, I had another uncle that was a great nuclear scientist on the other end. But the people were free to create their own future.
yeah.
And then they did away with the antitrust acts, the Robinson-Patman Act, Sherman Antitrust Act, Clayton Antitrust Act, and of course Clinton the Glass-Steagall Act. And so it just concentrated more of the wealth in the hands of the very few. Look, when we were young guys, there were no such thing as hedge funds and private equity groups. It didn't exist.
No, they
You, you,
didn't.
look- when I remember as a kid, we used to go to the doctor. The doctor had a nice house,
Yeah,
and his office was in the house.
yeah.
So everything got, and then again, I wrote it in my book, Trends 2000, back in the 90s, in the mid 90s, about how they started the whole change under the Clinton administration with the healthcare. What did they call it? Just drew a blank. It was the big generalized healthcare, and the healthcare industry started buying out
Medicare.
everybody else. What was that called? Starts with an H. HMOs.
HMOs. Okay, yeah, I remember those.
Yep. So that was the beginning of the death of that. So all the wealth has been put in the hands of a few, and they're in charge of everything. History, there's nothing new about this. It's just cycles of
Yeah.
history. You go back to the kings and queens days, with the peasants. And that's all we become now, are peasants on the global plantation of Slavelandia.
No, I couldn't agree with you more because I see, and thank you again for being here, is that I'm trying to educate the younger generation because what I see with these $1,200 government stimulus checks, it's no different than the Roman Empire when they had bread and roses and they were bringing people to the Colosseum, watching people get eaten by the lions. To me, a $1,200 check is almost kind of the same thing, and they're creating this money out of thin air. It's really, I see a lot of similarities. I don't know about
No,
you, but I do.
no, I agree with you 100%. It's chump change. It's nothing. Well, you're giving tens of trillions of dollars, probably at this point, hundreds of trillions when you go back to 2008, to the equity markets and the banks. The Wall Street on Parade, Pam and
Yeah,
Russ
did you see
Martin.
that thing
She's great.
yesterday?
Oh, they do great work.
Yeah, they do. She does really good work.
Oh, and all the numbers are there. She brought it out with the Levy Institute between 2000 and what, 2010. They pumped in secretly $29 trillion into the banking system, and now they're doing the same thing now. I mean, you can't make this. People will say to me, Celente, you got this wrong or that wrong. Yeah, I got it wrong. I thought the markets would crash and we'd go into a depression in 2012. I didn't know about a thing called quantitative easing or negative zero interest rate policy. They made this crap up. They didn't teach me that in Economics 101, a graduate school. I didn't know that the Federal Reserve was going to buy, as they're doing now, junk bonds.
Chuck bonds. Can you believe that?
Yeah. And all the money they're pumping in the repo markets overnight and buying more and more corporate debt and corporate bonds. So this is unprecedented. Where is it going? History to me is repeating itself. Go back to the 1930s. You had currency wars, trade wars. What was that place called? Japan? Oh, yeah.
Japan.
Great
Yeah.
Depression. Oh, and then World War II. History is repeating itself. Currency wars, trade wars. I mean, how many years do we hear about the trade war with China? Greatest Depression, World War III. And this will be the war that will end all wars. When they asked Einstein what weapons will be used to fight World War III, he said, I don't know. He said, but they'll be using sticks and stones to fight the Fourth World War. So that's what I'm greatly concerned about. Just as the people so easily follow these freaks, these little boys and girls, these Cuomos and Whitmers, whatever her name is, or Gruesome over there in California, they'll follow their leaders to war. It's, again, one of the covers of our Trends Journal was dumb enough to believe Bush's wars, dumb enough to believe the COVID war. Could you believe adults believed a little low-life piece of crappy, murderous junk like George W. Bush takes us to war against Iraq, kills over millions of people, destroys the place based on lies? That's how easy they follow. And they follow a Cuomo. How can anybody with a brain bigger than a pea follow this daddy's boy with an arrogant attitude? And he's the most popular politician now in America.
No, well, you say the guys who are born on third base. I don't know. Did you make that saying up? I love it. But
No,
these guys, yeah.
And that's who they are. Because he would be a nobody if daddy wasn't Mario. And let me tell you, his father's better than anybody's. I'm going to name the bridge after my daddy. It's not the Tappan Zee Bridge anymore. It's the Daddy Mario Cuomo Bridge. And we got to pay to change all the names here. Oh, and his little brother Chrissy over there on CNN, the Cartoon News Network. Oh, I'm sick. I keep my teeth. I'm so sick with the COVID. How come you didn't die? Because the people. Oh, you know what? The 81% of the people that died in Canada from COVID. 81%. Elderly, chronically ill, out of nursing homes.
Yeah.
The people that are dying are chronically ill, elderly, over 50%. And this is global, by the way. In Italy, the average age of the death?
What's the average age? 80?
80. Average. So chronically ill people that were suffering from other diseases, and they closed down New York State, right? We're one of the hardest closed down states. Do you know that the per capita death rate in New York is the highest in the world?
In New York?
That's right. And New York State has more deaths from COVID than we rank number 3 in the world.
Yeah.
And they locked down the joint because the people that are dying are in nursing homes. Most of the people that went to the hospital, they were already at home. They're obese, they're diabetics, they're suffering from respiratory ailments, heart disease, lung disease. So why don't you have them quarantined? What do you got us quarantined for?
Now, let me ask you, do you think this is like almost a smoke screen? It seems almost like a plot. I mean, I don't know, but all this stuff like Jeffrey Epstein and all this, all of a sudden it's just disappeared. Like it never happened. Is this
To me, here's the way I see it. I think China blew it out of proportion to stop the protests in Hong Kong.
I was thinking of that.
And then it blew out of proportion because the media started picking it up. And again, in the Trends Journal, we did a whole story about how Jeff Zucker, get rid of the Z, put an F in front of it, get rid of that. That's the little boy running CNN. And this is a story out of the Wall Street Journal telling his staff to keep promoting the COVID crisis, even though they kept doing it over and over again, because it was boosting ratings. Nobody was watching little Anderson Cooper, another little boy born on third base. Mommy was Gloria Vanderbilt. Mommy was Gloria Vanderbilt. I would be nobody if Mommy wasn't Gloria Vanderbilt. I'm a little arrogant piece of garbage, a little boy. Hey, remember when the little boy got hit when they were doing the Arab Spring in Egypt? And they rushed the little boy back home. And you want to get hurt again. These little pieces of shit are telling us what to do with our lives, and the people are taking it.
Yeah. Yes, we're just so morally bankrupt. And I think as bad as we have, think in England, Gerald, they still have kings and queens.
Yep.
I thought, it's almost worse. I mean, they're worshiping, instead of worshiping God, they're still worshiping kings and queens. With the Prince Andrew and the Jeffrey Epstein whole thing. And I mean, I thought we're crazy, but they're even crazier.
Well, look what happened in Italy. I mean, this Conti, he get rid of the O, put a U in his name. He closed down all of Italy. Where was the fight back? None. So here's the point that I'm making. Just like they Heil Hitler, march to Mussolini, salute Stalin, they do it over and over again to people. They follow their leaders. Again, my father used to say to me when I'd be upset about something like we're talking now, he'd say, son, take it easy, stop. He said, people have little minds. People have little minds. It does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men, said Samuel Adams.
Samuel Adams said that, huh?
Yeah. So it's that minority. The rest they have little minds. They Heil Hitler, salute to Stalin, march to Mussolini, believe a low-life piece of slimy garbage like a George W. Bush. A third base, again, born on third base. He'd be nowhere if Granddaddy was in Prescott and all the other thieves before that one, and Daddy was in Georgie Bush. He'd be nobody. And it's like George Carlin said, it's one big club and you ain't in it.
And we're not in it. And George Carlin, I think of all the comedians or commentators, but I think he nailed it just as well as anybody.
Oh, yeah. I saw him, by the way, here in Kingston. It was at the Ulster County Performing Arts. And I know his brother, Patrick.
I've actually met him a couple of times, believe it or not,
Oh, you did?
when he was around. So I've been very fortunate in that regard. And yeah, because I see it really, because I have an advisory business. I know you don't advise people about money, but I see what we have almost like as an economic fascism, like almost like a Mussolini, if you will. I mean, I think the whole narrative driven by the media it's really propaganda, if you will.
Pure propaganda. And you said it perfectly. It's fascism. It's not. It's economic fascism. It just goes to the rich and the powerful. The numbers are there. It's for everybody to look at. The numbers are there. The facts are there. Not making this up. Hey, it's not a conspiracy theory. The numbers are there.
I know, but that was because I've been working on a book on leverage buyouts. You're familiar with private equity, am I correct? How these companies.
Again, that didn't happen when we were younger guys. It didn't exist.
Well, I've done the research. According to The Economist, in the 1980s, there was roughly about 25 leverage buyout firms, Gerald, worldwide. And you know how many there are today, according to The Economist? Just take a guess.
900.
Try 6,600.
Wow.
So
Yep.
this whole buying these things with debt, Gerald, we know if you put too much debt on your, personal balance sheet or a family's balance sheet or your own business, and you're a business person like I am, if we put too much debt without doing it so prudently, we go either into bankruptcy or default. But if I'm a private equity guy, I throw it into a chapter. I don't give a hoot. And this is the whole thing looks like Hertz is. Remember Hertz? I don't know how many times I've used Hertz renting cars. Okay, they're gonna probably go bankrupt.
Oh yeah, I know.
And you know
Yeah.
why? It all goes back to the buyout. When the Carlyle Group and Clayton, Dubilier, and Rice carved them out in 2005. I mean, they carved them out in 9 months, and within 9 months, then they levered up the balance sheet again with more debt, and they pull out $1 billion debt-funded dividend, and this is why they're collapsing now, because they financed the rest of the affiliate with lots more debt. So when the Carlyle Group bought Hertz, it had like, I don't know, when the whole deal was done, it had like $13 billion in debt. Now it's got like 18, and there's no cash in the balance sheet. No wonder why they're going under. The same thing with J. Crew, Needless Markup, or Neiman Marcus.
Yep.
We can go on and on and on.
Look what happened to Toys R Us.
Yeah, that was Schmidt and Romney. Yeah.
We talking. Remember that guy? I forgot his name. When they were making a big deal out of it, it was in the late '80s, and I'll never forget USA Today. When it was USA Today was a decent newspaper at one time. I liked it. They used to do a lot of great coverage, but now it's just junk. But anyway, there was a guy, Sunbeam. He bought Sunbeam.
Oh, Chainsaw Al.
What's his name?
Al Dunlap. They used to call him Chainsaw Al.
That's it. So they made a big deal, right? They made a big deal when he was doing that. And now that's nothing compared to what's happened.
Oh, yeah.
That was nothing. It was chump change compared to what they've destroyed, all the businesses. So here's what's going on. We are in the greatest depression. There's not going to be a pullback out of this. And already a third of the businesses say they're not going to reopen, small to medium-sized businesses.
Yeah.
The bigs are just going to get bigger. And we're going to see massive unemployment continue. When jobs do come back, they're not going to be paying living wages. They weren't before this happened. What was 70% of the people were living paycheck to paycheck? 40% didn't have $400 in case of an emergency. That was before this happened. Oh, that place called Germany. Oh, yeah, one of the most, was it the fourth or fifth biggest economy in the world? Oh, and that other one, Japan, the third biggest economy. Oh, they're both in recession. 2 consecutive quarters of declining GDP. Hey, wait a minute. This is only the first quarter that was reported. Oh, that means they were going down in 2019, doesn't it? Before COVID hit. So it was going down already.
Yeah, I agree.
Mexico was in a recession. One after another, they were going down. So now this has come on top of it. We're going to see devastation beyond what's imaginable. Commercial real estate, college towns. Oh, we're not going to open up college. We're dead. How about up that place called Boston? Huh? Don't they have a lot of college towns up there? You know, a little thing or two about, yeah, right?
Yeah, what is the vocational school for Wall Street, you know?
Yeah.
All the Ivy Leagues, yeah. It's just, I mean, what does Harvard have, 40 billion? I mean, it's got more money than most, third world countries. I mean, in their endowment.
So now all these, and all the college towns, it was slowing down already, college enrollment. And now they're going to be teaching from home, not going to be opening. Less kids are going to be going. So the college towns go down. Tourism. I mean, who's going to want to travel anymore? It's going to be way off. So now you look at all the countries around the world that go south of the border. Oh, they were really living the high life down there in the Caribbean, weren't they? Yeah. They were only making it because of tourism. And now that's gone. Oh, you're going to go on a cruise and maybe you'll never get off it again? Or for how long if there's an outbreak? So the tourism industry globally, dead. Now you think of all the related industries, the hotel industry, of course, and the travel industry and the restaurants and all the suppliers that feed into that, how it keeps spreading out. So no, this is going to be like nothing we've ever seen before. And again, my greatest fear is that they're going to lead us to war after this.
Yeah, and I think it's worse too, Gerald, because during the Great Depression, people, I mean, debt's always been a problem, but people weren't this indebted the way they are
No,
now.
no. The average person wasn't in debt like this. You know, what do you have? The last number they gave was $250 trillion debt bubble. Look at the debt to GDP ratio of Japan. Again, they're in a recession. It was about 236. China, over $340 trillion in debt.
Yeah.
No, this thing is going down. And there's going to be civil wars raging. Again, the world was exploding before then. One of our top trends in 2020 was the New World Disorder. Oh, the protests in Lebanon, the protests in France, the protests in Chile, the protests in Peru, the protests in Colombia, the protests in Ecuador, the protests in South Africa, the protests in Algeria, the protests in India, all going on. Oh, Hong Kong, all going on before all this. And now it gets, and what were they protesting about mostly? Lack of basic living wages, corruption, violence, crime. That's going to escalate way beyond where it is now. So I'm very, very sad, very heartbroken, and to see how they sap joy out of life is just disgusting.
So what do you do for fun? I mean,
I'm not having fun. I used to love to listen to music and dance. It sapped the life out of me. I cooked for myself, but they've drained the spirit out of life. I watch people drive by. There's nothing going on here. The place is dead. This place is booming. Booming. I've watched people, this is the Catskill Mountains, right here.
Yeah.
People on bicycles with masks.
Yeah.
People driving in cars with their windows rolled up with masks.
What? I know.
How dumb could you be? How fearful? There's a denial of death. There's always been. My dear friend Thomas Naylor, may he rest in peace. He started the Second Vermont Republic, a great guy. When he died, my life changed. It was such a great loss. And he used to talk about it all the time in America, the denial of death. And why did people take all the pharmaceutical drugs? There's a denial of death. All right, a virus came. People are going to die from it. But again, you look at the numbers, and I don't, you know the numbers. What, 9 million died last year of air polluted related deaths? 1.5 million died last year of worldwide of tuberculosis. 480,000 died in the United States of smoking related diseases. On and on and on. And now what are we? Oh, we're going to reach 100,000. Yeah, again, people die. People die. But anyway, so I don't have a lot of fun. I'm very sad and I'm very concerned.
Well, we'll have to get together. Well, I live in New England. It'd be nice. Take a ride up to see you one of these. We'll have dinner.
Anytime. I'd love to see you.
That'd be good because this whole COVID crisis, and with the deaths are up there right now. But what drive me bullshit, quite frankly, is that how many opioid deaths we had, and there was no really, 70,000 in the Center for Disease Control said in 2017, like 70,000 deaths, like more people than all the guys that died in Vietnam. But now we have COVID.
I lost a niece. I had a niece that OD'd on opiates. And my poor sister's in a nursing home. That was her only daughter. And all she does is stare at a picture all the time. So that's okay. Big Pharma could get away with killing us in a million different ways. But Barry, I have to run now.
Yeah, right. But anyway, so Gerald, thank you so much. We'll have to do this again. And
anytime. Hey, you have any other questions before I go, or?
No, this is great. I wanted to do this, and thank you so much. And we'll do this again, my friend.
And I'd love to meet you.
Take care.
All right.
Yeah, we'll do that. God bless.
You too. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye.